Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Community Exchange podcast. I am Matthew Scott Goldstein, better known as MSG in the industry. On this podcast, I'm talking to the visionaries building the media ecosystem of the future. Together, we cover the challenges, the opportunities, and what's next for our industry. As always, the Community Exchange podcast is brought to you by OpenWeb, the company building a safer, fairer, and more trustworthy internet. Now, we have a great conversation for you. Johnny is the global head of Martech, AI, and data ops at EssenceMediaCom. He is a pioneering leader in technology and marketing innovation with over 17 years of experience driving growth through cutting-edge marketing solutions. At Group M, he spearheaded the largest AI-powered creative analysis, optimizing campaign production and performance for WPP's top 10 global clients. Currently, Johnny leads Group M's Google Privacy Sandbox in the US and identity solution initiatives, empowering marketers to navigate the cookieless future. Johnny, before we talk about EssenceMediaCom, I love to talk about your entrepreneurial side.
Yeah, I think now, especially with the ad agencies and a lot of just ad tech, entrepreneurial has always been a big thing that we always kind of look for. But I think my roots have been pretty hardcore about just kind of the spirit of doing it and then just being part of the ecosystem. So back in 2005, when I graduated college in the spring of
Damn, you're
2005,
young.
I know I'm
I'm
still
just
kind of
joking.
like old and kind of young. I got a chance to do Y Combinator second round
I read
ever.
about that. I'm
Yeah,
fascinated by Y
in September
Combinator.
2005. So
Was it just you?
no, I had a business partner who had just graduated from Princeton, and we had spent the summer concepting, building out some prototype about local event aggregation. And in 2005, this was the very first cut of what is it, Ruby on Rails,
Okay.
just the emergence of startups at like
Were you
kind of its
ahead of
purest
your
form.
time back then in 2005 with events, or was it?
Oh, it was really, really, I think ahead of the time.
Okay.
Like what was happening was that right around 2003 to 4 and 5, there was this wave of Y Combinator just being this really exciting place for startups to get formed.
Right.
And what happened then was that you would only select like a handful of companies, two-person teams. I think at the time it was like maybe 12 or $15,000.
They gave you that, right?
They would only give you
Right.
$15,000, and now it's
50, 100, right?
hundreds and
Okay.
millions of
Okay.
dollars just kind of right off the bat. So we were selected to go to Palo Alto, go just do the thing.
And how old
And
were you?
then I was 21. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, I didn't think it was crazy.
I know, but looking back at 21, getting
I
that type
mean,
of money and that ability to do something like that is pretty insane.
I mean, my business partner was 19, and he was a
Okay.
PhD at Harvard, comp sci. And we had a good team, but he didn't want to, decamp and go to the West Coast. And that's why we never really got to progress. But like to
Oh.
give you like,
And what's he doing now?
I think he's an engineer and just, I mean, he's done really well and just an engineer. But like to go back to that time of how crazy it was, Y Combinator was having meetings at Paul Graham's house in Cambridge.
Paul
And
Graham is
the founder of Y
okay.
Combinator. Yeah.
Who's running Y Combinator now? Isn't it people we know?
I mean, Gary Tan, the whole team
Okay.
is now, but we're talking about like the greatest startup incubator in history. But at the infancy, it was such humble beginnings. It was different. We would sit in classrooms at Harvard, and the Reddit team was there. I mean, I think now what is now known as the OpenAI team would be there with Sam Altman and then the team.
Right. Sam Altman was the one who was always involved with Y Combinator, right?
But like at that time, they were the spring cohort of 2005.
Did you meet all these people?
Yeah, in passing, and then we were kind of just there, and it wasn't like tons and tons of people and teams. I mean, the room was not even anywhere close to full, and I think there was only like maybe 30 to 50 people max.
And what year
of the
again was
first
this? This
event.
was 2000 and
2005.
right. So like a
Yeah.
couple years after the dot-com bomb back then. So it's probably just starting to take off.
So yeah, the 2002, like 2001, I mean,
Right.
stuff was just kind of a depression within larger tech. And this was an eager time where people are hunting for consumer-based startups and understanding what scale was. Facebook had just started at that point, really, where it was college only, it was private,
I
and
remember that. Yes.
I mean, there was no algorithmic feed. Just the basic building tools of scaling a business was there. Graham's like awesome essays about like startup principles. And I mean, all that stuff, I mean, I was doing in college. And that's the stuff that really kind of drove me from, then to where I'm at now.
Okay, so how'd you get from Y Combinator to agency world?
Yeah. The Y Combinator startup that we were looking at was doing like local event aggregation. So user growth, how to use advertising and ad tech at the time was kind of the principles of how we wanted to grow. And it led me into a job in Boston about just doing a small ad agency that serviced like things that we all knew. Like I was working on Tonka, Play-Doh, Play School, and Oral-B and Dunkin' Donuts, and it was just brands that you'd known of every
And
day.
what was your role at the agency then?
I was looking at site analytics and looking at like just bounce, like
Okay.
paid media bounce, like what the clicks are, fundamental metrics in like 2006 and 7 that like were just kind of like part of the 90s ecosystem. But it was pretty basic in terms of like what was available. I mean, it gives you a real reminder of what we have now as that continuity from 15 plus years ago, but it's also just a different era. Like we were using Omniture, I think well before
I remember
Adobe,
Omniture. I remember
yeah,
Omniture. Yep.
made an acquisition and all the little kinks and quirks with it, outputting reports. I mean, it's some of the stuff that I was doing and working with AdSense and et cetera.
Okay, and then how'd you get from, is it Hill Holiday you said?
So that was a small agency. I did that for
Up in
3
Boston, and
years.
how'd you
Yeah.
how'd you get to New York?
And then I did Hill Holiday for 3 years, and it was just bigger and, like, a great agency to work with. And then uh, had spent almost 10 years in Boston, and I wanted to move here to New York. So I left Hill, I came up here to do a startup, and a lot of the startup stuff
Wait,
was
so you
based
did
on
entrepreneurial agency for 10 years and
about
then back
6. Yeah.
6 and then back to a startup.
Yeah, and that's
And
kind
is
of
that the
been
digital wallet one?
that was yeah, that was kind of looking at, digital wallet and, at Hill, I was, the mobile, like, advertising guy, and we did a lot of pioneering stuff, and you could see at the time where some of these fundamentals were gonna go. I think the surveillance aspect of some of the app SDKs was kinda clear,
Strong
and
word,
some of the
surveillance, but yeah.
good and
Yeah.
bad, and then, a lot of the performance of, like, what makes mobile apps, like, work were just, like, at its infancy. So I think a lot of the startup work I did was building out a full prototype, looking at kind of like what are the fundamentals of what that business model looks like. And then I was looking at some business partners, did some rounds with some VCs, just quietly talking about like what kind of potential this has. And I think one of the things I really concluded was it wasn't this like long journey I wanted to like go down. Like I didn't want to be so actively just participating in surveillance and then calling it this other thing. So I think that was kind of a real lesson for me about thinking about business models that you get really excited about. And you can't fake that in any kind of startup stuff or anything we do, you can't fake that.
Right.
So it's been a really good lesson to me about like what to do and those fundamentals. So I ended up going back to another ad agency and working on a lot of that stuff with mobile, more just cross channel of everything.
Because you had all this experience in the SDK and what's going on that
Yeah.
you became like the mobile expert when you went back to the agency?
I'd always been a mobile expert from when I was at Hill to
Okay.
kind of going at my little round at like Havas. And I mean, it was a mobile agency. So it was Mobex at the time and it was specializing in mobile advertising. So talking about like just the average revenue per user, what it meant for advertisers, what it meant for tech, it was something that I had a lot of experience on, especially with user acquisition. So thinking about that as kind of a set of problems kind of led me to go back into doing consultancy stuff. So I had a company called Hyperstop, which
Right. So you
was
you did like 3 different hops and like,
yeah.
which is so cool. And
I mean, I think it's cool now in retrospect. I think it was
it
hard
doesn't
as
seem like
AF.
it's a typical career path that people I know have taken.
Oh yeah. I
And
mean,
and it's and I think you get a great experience from doing your own thing.
oh yeah.
And I also believe the agency you're at now must love you that you have all this entrepreneurial experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. Like, we demand, I think, now, especially within larger advertising, entrepreneurial mindset and like that desire. And I feel I never really bring it up too much. I don't feel like it's something I do about like bragging myself a lot, but I did it at a level that was so unbelievably, I would say, hardcore, because it's not like I'm just consulting for a little bit. I was consulting and I ran my own company for more than 5 years. And I created a little sub company within that, and it was great. There's problems and challenges associated with all of that. And it's just an awesome experience about like just completing things that you just have to complete, and just running all the aspects of commercial partnership strategy, and it's just an awesome, awesome experience.
And then at some point, you got the call back from an agency
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that I didn't love about running a consultancy for 5 years was that,
paying employees,
I mean, yeah, I had
cash flow.
payroll, I managed cash flow. I managed cash flow for 2 different kinds of businesses with consulting
It's
and
really hard.
video production. As you know, it's so hard. And I wanted to hang out with more friends and peers, because as a consultancy, you're always just kind of like selling. And I wanted to have an ability to just kind of have a place to do deep thinking.
Right. So just as an aside, for my consulting, I really never hired anyone.
Yeah.
And I had 2 or 3 people who worked with me. And the deal was when I got paid, you got paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of me is like, I don't mind selling. I'm pretty good at it, but I like doing the work as well.
Yeah.
And I hate not be able to do the work, which is like sort of you're saying, like you want to be able to do the work and get your hands dirty. I also believe that's how you really grow and learn.
Yeah. And as a part of that, it's how you treat people, how do you build a team, how do you build an equity relationship with a business partner where you're not going to be able to just pay them up front, but then the promises you deliver and then you execute to make it sustainable. I mean, it's a great growth marker that is underappreciated about like what is actually possible with your kind of effort, time, and just like diligence. We see this, I think, just across everything we do, right? It just takes a lot of hard work. And it's not going to be anyone coming out and being like, you did a good job, you and your business. But it is that effort that gets you better. And some people recognize that. It opens up
Yeah.
better
So it's like when
opportunities.
I've been consulting for 16 years on my own. Before COVID, for 10 years, I worked 60 to 70 hours a week
Yeah.
minimum. I used to go to 4 or 5 different offices a day,
Yeah.
get home at 6 p.m., would do work from 6 to 9,
Yeah.
right? And every weekend I have to catch up.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. People don't realize sometimes how much work and effort goes into getting where you got today.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things for me. Like, I know a lot of people who just stick within tech, just ad tech, just within agency, and I feel like you can have really great positive experiences. But one of the theses that I had with my company Hyperstop was that the ad technology consultancy was based on this principle that as complexity was increasing within the ecosystem, there had to be more perspective that people could deliver, different ways of thinking about things, different ways of talking about things, and different approaches to solving these problems and these ideas. Because a lot of the tech, once you just keep doing it, it just becomes myopic, depressing, and you kind of lose sight about like what is the vision of what needs to be done.
But that's when I feel like you need like a big boss who says, okay, you've been working all this stuff. Let me take you above at 10,000 feet and talk about
Yeah,
this. And what is the end user want? What are we trying to accomplish here?
yeah.
I get stuck in the muck too, and I love having those more strategic conversations.
I think that's one of the most important things right now, because I tell my teams where it's hard, and the hard is the feature. It's not a bug. If you think it's hard and it is overwhelming, it's happened to me, and the relationship can blow up. Like it might not be the right person that's working on the team. The advent of where the tech is going is that it was so simple. And the thing that people are forgetting is that this simple was just by circumstance.
Yeah.
Like we are entering this phase where it's not just much more complicated, but the dependencies to understand and synthesize previously had information to make better decisioning, better understanding of what the roadmaps are. I think it's an awesome set of leadership stuff that we all kind of need to tackle, but I see the opportunity in that.
Okay. So you're at EssenceMediaCom right
Mhm.
now, right? So what other companies are under that umbrella? What's the holding company? Just give me a little lay of the land there. Cause I got to tell you, I've been in this industry forever and I still get confused about all these sub agencies of the agency of the holding company and everything.
Yeah. So Essence MediaCom is a agency. It's a
And it was
global.
Essence and was MediaCom and they merged.
It was two global networks that merged last year, and the agencies are all under WPP.
Okay.
It's the largest agency holding group that's legendary. I mean, the history has been one of the defining aspects of
And
advertising.
who used to be the boss of WPP?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to go through all this, but
Okay.
yeah, the whole team's there and all that stuff. I mean, my level is not anywhere near this level. So a lot of the
Yeah, but
stuff
you're the
that
person who gets the shit done.
I mean,
Yeah, you
yeah,
get the shit
I mean,
done.
yeah,
I'm in the
absolutely.
meetings with you, Johnny. You get the shit done, which is good.
I mean, this is what it takes. I mean, this is really kind of those challenges. But agencies represent not just the advertisers, but they represent a perspective across the industry about what needs to happen to make these advertisers whole in what they're looking and interested to do. So, tons of history there. But WPP has a media buying group called Group M.
Yep.
And then Group M has a couple of these agency networks. All the holdcos have multiple agency networks. So EssenceMediaCom is the largest. And we have 10,000 plus employees, and Group M is one of the largest in the world in all these little dimensions.
And how many employees do you have in your world now?
What do you mean by
How many people report to you in your world of?
It depends. It depends on the project and it depends on that moment of time, but it's from, a couple dozen on a project to more. And the thing that we do have is a matrix
Okay.
organization. So
It's
depending
complicated.
on, project and kind of that delivery, it depends.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're working on so many interesting things. What's the one most interesting thing you're working on? Let's talk about that one first.
So yeah, I work on B2B data tech now, and I lead that as kind of our core priority. And then Sandbox, of course, is the other thing that I'm working on. And Sandbox, I think, is enormously interesting because it's a net set of new signals. So one of the things that I have always tried to like orient myself towards is more innovation and more cutting edge things within advertising
And we should tell
marketing tech.
all the listeners we're taping this on July 29th.
Yeah.
So whatever we say about PSB, Privacy Sandbox, and third-party cookie deprecation, whatever we say right now, I'm sure will be antiquated by the time this airs.
I think right now, if it'll be more general, but yeah, if we did this like 2 weeks ago,
Oh, 2 weeks ago,
because we had that earlier date,
yeah.
yeah, I think some of the stuff would have been outdated already. So our timing's been very fortunate and lucky.
And when it comes to Privacy Sandbox and third-party cookie deprecation, what do you tell your agency? What do you tell your advertisers, and what do they think about this? And do they like, I don't really care. I do my own thing. I do MMM. What are those conversations like?
Yeah. Um, I think what has happened, especially with Sandbox and then the deprecation of cookie, is that a lot of the knee-jerk reaction of what has happened, where now we're in an environment where there's LinkedIn influencers, there's trade journals, there's ad tech blogs, there's CEOs talking on YouTube at conferences. There's a huge set of really interesting, important voices. But those voices, opinions, and perspectives, good. The way the tech kind of reads out from white papers and the results of the findings is another level of communication that I think is underappreciated. And that's kind of where I kind of really step in. And I feel like my consulting background really kind of kicks in. It's let's read
That's
everything.
why they're lucky to have you there.
I feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to have a perspective because our corporate position of what we say and what we do, of how we represent our clients, it's important that we know as much as possible about what's being understood and set out there. And the way that I think we better articulate the perspective is just through scenario planning. So a lot of the things that we do about if you're to put money into this kind of campaign versus that, scenario planning is a really good way to just understand and explain how do we think about what these different actions are from these different kinds of players. So the net about Sandbox really is that if this cookie deprecation is happening, where
Which, by the way, it's been happening for the
yeah,
past 6 years, right? It's
yeah, across the whole industry,
Yes.
we see it from Safari and Firefox. The utility of a cookie is just degrading, and we know that it continues into the next year. So the value of that is going to be there, but how much more can any advertiser or technology provider squeeze that out to just enable everything? If we look at the other side and say these are net new signals that don't really have as much peers, there's no like equivalent with like attribution reporting in a view through
Well,
conversion.
and that my biggest thing about Sandbox and cookies is measurement and attribution.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that gets lost. And I feel like in all the conversations we're having, all the experts we have, we don't bring in enough experts in measurement and attribution to tell us, did the person who see the ad really buy something?
Hmm.
And that gets me frustrated. We're having another meeting coming up on October 9th, and I'm trying to get more people from measurement and attribution come and attend that conversation because I think they need to be in the room.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this is the interesting paradox. Advertising has been an ongoing effort for more than 100 years. And how we measure what we know is backed by enormous amounts of data science, behavioral science, and et cetera. But
And guesswork.
and guesswork, really. And that's kind of the other side of it. But we're at a point where we know more than ever before. We have different ways to do this study. And at the same time, there's a lot of gaps in understanding of how we feel and what we know and not know about the different elements. So I think it is a larger question now about what is effective? What should we do? What is the balance between the short term, long term? We see this a lot where you do all this like lower funnel DR, but then leave the brand just kind of just flailing in the wind. There's outcomes for that. And we have different ways to measure how much you should be investing, like what does good look like. And you don't have to do any of it. But this is the consequence is that we can know what kind of happens.
When you talk to your advertisers,
Mhm.
do you talk to the CMO world, the CFO world? Is there a certain person you look to talk to at that company who gets it the most?
We talk to CMOs, so we talk to marketers. But if you are, and this is well, I think documented, if you are inside of the brand, you are kind of responsible to the CFO.
Right. And I've been hearing recently that the CFOs are playing a bigger part in the ad budget
Hmm.
and the return on ad spend because that's their job.
Hmm. And a great example about this is that we talk about this where CMOs have to go to their finance teams and ask for investment or ask for just a budget to do something. And different teams have different climates about what is acceptable and what is not. And a great example is if we're putting in X amount of money in the lower funnel and we want to take some money into the upper funnel, how can you measure the upper funnel as concretely as the lower funnel? And that
And the answer is
I mean, it's hard.
it's hard. It's really hard.
It's also kind of goes
But if you spend
into
all your time in lower funnel, you're never growing the upper funnel. That's issues as well.
yeah, but it also goes into the dimensions of how do you explain that to non-marketers? Like, what is the way we can actually track and measure? And then different teams have different comfort levels of the short term, long term. So that is not a conversation about like, can you just explain it? What's the environment to explain it in? Like, what's the history of making these non-investments? What's the data pointing to you about oversaturating some of the lower funnel and some of these other underinvested channels? So that is a very modern and complex conversation that's only becoming harder, regardless of cookies.
Is the CMO the hardest job in the company then? Just because it's so many intangibles, so many unknowns, and there's sort of sometimes grading their own data, like, oh yeah, everything's working. Like, yeah, but my sales are down 10%. Don't tell me everything's working.
Um, I think it's an extremely difficult job, but I would say there's lots of jobs within a large org that are extremely challenging. The job that is underappreciated is that we don't spend money in advertising just because we can.
No one does.
I mean, you think so, right?
Right.
But the idea of what is this return look like? And then how do we explain that return? It's very, very important that people can articulate that in different degrees. So, a great example is the risk taking and also kind of the thought process of what does this mean? So, one of the best ones seen was I was at a conference and it was just, let's just shut off marketing for half the country. And that's how we go get the board approval and
I love
explain,
that idea.
yeah, this is the way we know that
Did
this is
they do
effective.
that?
We've seen stuff like that, yeah. But
Well, sometimes it happens by accident, right?
it happens by accident. It happens by these things. But if you take a step back, like the thing that is kind of great about that and that's brave is we're going to say, no, we're not going to do this for half the country because it drives our thinking that everybody really needs this.
It,
But
it
and you
feels like
show
it
it.
feels like as an agency person, you should go into every single meeting. You want to know if marketing works? Let's cut it off in half the country, see what happens. Like, no, 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 you can't do that. Okay, let's have this conversation then. It like resets everything.
So this is, I think, kind of where it is important to be aggressive about believing in just not just the marketing, but like how do we execute the story, not just for marketers, but with the CFO about like what's going to matter? What do we see? If you believe it, let's prove it. And then we have to construct a way where it doesn't hurt everything permanently. But these, I think, higher level principles about leadership that help you navigate and answer some of these larger
Yeah.
questions. And this is where it also takes a lot of that creativity because it doesn't matter that I managed this budget, I had all these people. It's what are you going to do about it to show and tell that story?
It's funny. Sometimes I think marketing is simple, but talking to you, I realize how many other layers there are that as a publisher person, I don't think about that much.
Yeah, I agree with that because I haven't spent a lot of time on the publisher side,
But
but
that's why it's nice when you come to
yeah,
the meetings, you get to see the other side, and it's nice having that relationship.
I I have really appreciated that working with you and the teams because it is something that I sometimes have lost perspective on because the UI, the design, all the stuff
I
really
think both
matters.
sides, publishers and agency and advertisers, if they talked more, we'd have a much better ecosystem.
I think so.
Okay, so in my intro, we talked about AI.
Mhm.
So let's spend some time talking about AI. Like, what are you working on with AI inside of EssenceMediaCom?
Um, Within just EssenceMediaCom and across WPP, there's a number of AI different projects and initiatives to utilize not just one AI from ChatGPT, but several flavors, several different companies, and integrated different workflows, whether it's creative, data analysis, just pure tinkering and sandboxing, different kind of prototypes. Every capacity, I think, has been done. I think we've been recognized for not just the work and scale, but it's also something that our clients are really looking for. And
Are
I
any of
personally
the
think
AI initiatives groundbreaking? Are they just like a little thing incremental here? Is any big stuff happening? Like I get nervous that in a publisher world, most of the AI initiatives are small little become more efficient versus the groundbreaking, a different way to tell a story.
I would say we're definitely closer to the groundbreaking stuff in interesting ways
That's exciting.
than just it's just there. Um, Doing data analysis, doing kind of creative analysis using AI, something I've worked on, and then how we kind of incorporate into workflows for different clients and different teams. I mean, that is breakthroughs. I mean, it's not something that is as simple as like mobile or social when it emerged, where it's this channel, it has its own little thing. It'll just kind of be clear because you just have to like buy something on Facebook and it's clear like what that ecosystem is.
Yep.
AI has something where I have a workflow, I can edit it in numerous different ways, whether it's machine learning data set or just cleaning data so that someone else can do something
And is
bigger.
the agency like everyone behind all this? Are there people nervous about what it means for their future?
I think there's some people who are nervous about some of the future, but there's also 100 other things to worry about
Okay.
the future. So I don't see a lot of agency people thinking about this AI, my job. I think it's different in publishing.
Well, because publishing has the editorial side.
Correct.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of them are just nervous about what this means for the future.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's more obviously something to be nervous about.
We've seen that from the AI research, just kind of in general, marketing's at the very forefront of how we use AI and what we think about it. I mean, the data flow is much more accessible. The data is created at mass volume faster, and then you can make more rapid impact into kind of solutioning and editing kind of ways of process. I mean, if you look at pharma, I mean, it's such a longer cycle that, of course, there's going to be impact there, but you don't see it as tangibly as quickly. So I think it's a great use case about where it kind of fits and you see it through the results.
Speaking of pharma, are there any categories or industry categories that you like dealing with the best, like pharma versus CPG versus retail? And then talk a little bit about that to retail media networks and what that means for closing the loop.
Oh, good question. I've gotten a chance to work across almost all the different categories of advertisers. I would say there isn't one that really sticks out. I've worked on small, they're just like
Like the one that always was
massive.
the most interesting for me was auto.
Auto's always cool. I'm a huge car guy, so
Right.
I love that, and
What
sometimes
car do you drive?
that's oh, I have a little Volkswagen Tiguan
Okay.
that I love, but it's also been giving me terrible problems.
So auto's interesting. Anything
Mhm.
else? And okay, retail media networks. Like I was going to ask this before. Like measurement and attribution is there. Like
Yeah.
they know if someone bought it. Has that in your purview at all?
I've been working on it a little bit here and there, especially as it kind of impacts the B2B. I think retail media network is the greatest thing that's been happening with advertising, where it's just massive net new in terms of signal availability of audience and data. But calling it a retail media network is such a disservice to really
It's
what
a
it is.
bad name. Someone named it poorly, right?
Yeah, it's a terrible name, and then I was having a discussion with someone where the future of it seems like it's better to call it like an audience, syndication or audience something. Some wordsmithing has to be there, but it is truly an audience that is a, different, definition of accessibility, captiveness, and, just kind of volume because it's changing. It's a data set that gets updated. We've seen in the past of things like Amex, Visa, MasterCard. And then this is much more interesting because you can do in store, you can do just kind of this long connection across data sets that you can augment. And there's more of this kind of like repetition. So, how we associate our primary data set with a retail media network, I think, is a big frontier that we're just starting to kind of scratch.
And then let's talk about in 5 years, where do you think you will be? And if I look at the pattern, you might be in your own little entrepreneurial world again. Where do you think the agency world will be? Where do you think publishers will be?
Ooh, good question. I think I mean, I have no idea where I'll be. I mean, I'm a, father now, and,
How old are your kids?
I have a 3-year-old, and then my wife's, due in January.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. And I mean, my perspective, I think, has changed. I mean, I love my daughter so much, and this new nugget coming is, I think, so exciting. It has
You
kind of
just called it,
shaped
you
me.
say a new nugget?
It's a new nugget, yeah, yeah.
That's a great term. I have to use that one.
Um, I feel like it kind of drives me to just do more. I mean, I wanna make a more of a dent and little crack into making an impact, and that's really the only thing that really drives me.
And some in some ways, like Privacy Sandbox made me think that way as well. Like I wanted to work because I want to help the open internet of
Mhm.
publishers. And I feel like Privacy Sandbox, if done properly, is a way to redefine the way publishers and advertisers work together, which is why I love trying to help that initiative.
Absolutely. That's why I feel like, working on it feels very natural. In terms of just, like, my ambition about, like, trying to just do something that is at the cutting edge and impactful in this way that really kind of helps shape the larger industry. Make marketing more effective, make it safer, make it easier to use and experience. I think those things, I mean, who knows where it'll go, and hopefully it'll open more doors for what I want to do, working with great people, great teams, and initiatives that just really like make us say, like, wow. Um, th-
And what's your take on news and information publishers of the future? Like, how do you think you'll get your news and information?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a huge news junkie. I read a lot, and I don't just
Do
read.
you listen as well? Because I get a lot of my news from podcasts now.
I do. I'm a diligent podcast listener. I subscribe to the Financial Times on paper for the weekend.
Okay.
I
Like old
subscribe.
school, you read it?
Yeah, I got it on paper because I want
Impressive.
my daughter to see that I read things on paper. I subscribe like to the information, which is always a splurge, but the absolute best tech nerd journalism. And then I go through hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of articles a week. I used to have probably for when I was in high school to when I was probably into my mid-30s, I would have a reading list of just dozens of blogs I would just go through every single day. I mean, I had a record rate. I'd read almost every single blog post from a couple of bloggers end to end, and it helped me very much shape just thinking and just the overall perspective. Since I have less time to do that, and then the mix has just changed, where TikTok, these little bites, these different cuts is happening. Um, I think you just are experiencing everything as you just kind of go through your journey, and then the different things that kind of stick kind of hopefully opens up more information. So whether you see a headline or push notification, you have algorithms kind of find more of that for you. And you kind of have to, I think, lean into that to find more discovery.
Yeah, I always believe I want to be able to see a story and say, give me a deep dive on this, but make it voice and then make it a podcast in my podcast feed at 6:45 in the morning when I walk my dogs. Let me consume that for 7 minutes at 1.75 speed. Like that's
Yeah.
how I want to consume some of my data and news and information in the future.
Yeah. I think this is where it's clear that the choice of users to kind of consume whatever they want to, whatever they need, anywhere at any moment is the future. So how we atomize, how we read things, I mean, is an interesting start to, are we going to synthesize this information? Like, what's the high level that we can even grasp really quickly? I think publishing's in for such an interesting experience because it's clearly more valuable than ever before in the advent of AI. But even AI lacks perspective, maybe some of the negativity and criticism that is so interesting in good writing and perspective. And then lots of just the curation of like, what is good? What's a better perspective? We can see AI do some of this with recommendations discovery, but I always look at kind of the limitations and some of the things that it isn't serving, and that's an opportunity that I think a lot of people just have to get after because that's what people want. People are clamoring for it.
Okay, one last question, and then we have to break. With a nugget on the way and a 3-year-old, what are your hobbies besides taking care of the car?
Uh,
And then you have to ask me that question because I got so many hobbies I need to tell you about.
oh, I'd love to hear
I
it.
want to hear you first. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm a huge sneaker nerd.
Okay.
So going through just historical
When you
sneakers
walked
and-
in, I noticed they were nice.
I know.
And they're
Flyknits.
so clean also.
Flyknits are always my favorite. I love cooking Korean food. So
What's your favorite
my
Korean
daughter-
restaurant in New York City?
Oh,
Cote, C-O-T-E.
Goat, yeah, is way up there.
Wait, you pronounce it different.
So yeah, goat is the Korean pronunciation for flour. Yeah.
I am taking my kids there. You want to come with us?
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll make it happen.
It's a great restaurant. I go there with friends.
I have not been there. It's on the top
Oh,
of my
really?
list. Have not been there. My son William is dying to go there.
Because you're gonna have the best time.
Yeah.
But like the thing I love about it is, and that enthusiasm that your son has, is when I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, kids would just give you shit for being Korean and like eating Korean food. Like I would take Korean food. My mom's like, you should hide that so they don't give you shit at it about it at school. And now it's like so cool in so many ways that I culturally am so blown away by that. But I feel like I have to like make my daughter not just like love and appreciate it, but just like enjoy and experience it in her way and in her journey. So I love cooking Korean food. It's gotten pretty crazy where I like source like cool soy sauce from like cool farms in Korea, rice.
That's
And
love that.
it's been fun. I had a friend over and we were cooking for her and her son, and like last night with my wife.
I assume you live in Brooklyn somewhere, right?
Williamsburg, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so my hobbies,
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yoga,
Oh yeah.
pickleball,
Oh yeah.
golf with my kids,
Oh, yeah.
travel, of course. And then my favorite hobby is probably dragon boat racing.
Oh yeah, you mentioned the dragon boat. I know dragon boat really well.
Right. And I love that. And I do it in Pennsylvania, Bucks County. And it's a great community.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to end it here. I have to say one thing, Johnny Wan, EssenceMediaCom is friggin' lucky to have you. And thank you to OpenWeb for allowing me to do these podcasts. It's not a lifelong dream. It's been a dream since podcasts were invented. And that's what we got. Thank you.